right, so let's go ahead and go over our scriptures. So remember, we have been practicing the Beatitudes. We have 2 of them left. We have this week and next week. We'll be done with all of them. Then we'll test on all of them. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's see how many of them we remember. Okay, so let's start with the first one. So Matthew 5:3. Well, you don't have to say the chapter. We'll just say all of them. So the first one is, blessed are the poor in spirit, kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. And then our last one before our break was, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. So today we're going to go to Matthew 5:10. That's where we are today. So Matthew. So this one's a little longer than the other ones we've been learning so far. Longer. So it's blessed. I'm going to read it. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Matthew 5:10. So yeah, that one's a little longer. Hold on, let me space this out right here. Huh? Yeah, they all kind of familiar. Okay, sorry. Okay, so let's say it together. Blessed. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Matthew 5:10. Again, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Matthew 5:10. Good. So this is our next beatitude. Okay. And so it says, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. And what that simply means is, blessed are those who are treated bad because of their belief in the Bible, of their belief in Jesus, their belief in his death on the cross. Some people choose to treat people like that wrong. People who believe, Christians like that wrong. They persecute them. When you persecute someone is when you start to treat them bad or treat them wrong because of what they believe in. It's no real reason why. You're just doing it because of what they believe in. But the Bible tells us that blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, persecuted because of Jesus, because we will receive the kingdom of heaven. And so, yes, you may be persecuted, but you receive the kingdom of heaven. You get to dwell in heaven with the Lord, and not just the kingdom after, but the kingdom now. You get to, receive his kingdom now here on earth, the blessings that come with being a part of his kingdom. Okay. So that's our scripture, Matthew 5:10 this week. So let's go ahead and get into our lesson for today. So we've been talking about Jesus's public ministry, how he has gone out into the earth. He's performing miracles. He's preaching. Everyone has heard about him. He's pretty famous at this time. Everyone knows him. And so they know that whenever Jesus comes into town, that everyone should go there because they want to either hear him preach or they want him to perform some type of miracle for them, to heal them, to do something, right? We talked about the nobleman and how he, how he had gone and he had asked Jesus to heal his son. We talked about blind Bartimaeus, how the Lord had healed Bartimaeus. Remember, he couldn't see. God gave him his vision. The paralyzed man, his friends brought him. Jesus told him, get up and walk. The man at the pool of Bethesda, same thing with him. Jesus told him, get up and walk. But we also seen how Jesus had done things like whenever he cleansed the temple. Thank you.
David and them don't know what they're doing, so I don't know how you're going to do it.
Okay, all right. How he had cleansed the temple, and you remember they were doing all kinds of things that weren't allowed in that he did not want going on in his house, and so he cleansed the temple. We also talked about how the Pharisees and the religious leaders, they don't like him, right? Because Jesus had been doing things differently. He was forgiving people's sins. He was saying that he was equal to God, which he is, but they didn't believe it. They didn't believe it at all. And so they especially after he cleansed the temple, and whenever he went in the synagogue and said that the Isaiah prophesied about him, they really were like, we have to try to get rid of him. We have to do something so that he can be gone, because they were just like, he's causing problems. He's causing all kinds of issues, saying that he's God, saying that he can do this, saying that he can do that. And none of that is true, when in fact it is true, but they just didn't believe, and they should know, right? They're the religious leaders, right? They should know. But like we talked about, they just had religion. They didn't know who the Lord was. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue talking about a miracle. So there was a man, an important man from the city of Capernaum. This is another city in Israel that, Jesus would often go to, where he would preach, perform miracles, and like I told you, everyone has heard about him at this time, and everyone knows if you have an issue, who do you go to? Jesus. You go to him to figure it out, especially if there's no one else that can help you. So there was a man, and he was a leader, he was a ruler as well, and he had heard that Jesus was in Capernaum, and he was like, man, I really need to go see him. And that was because this man had an issue. His daughter was sick. His daughter was sick, pretty much like the nobleman's son, but she was worse off, because she really was to the point of dying. Like, she was on her deathbed, she could die any second, any minute. Anything could happen to her. And she was young too. She wasn't as young as the nobleman's son, but she was young as well. So this man's name is Jairus, and this is his daughter. And he wanted his daughter to be healed. And again, just like the nobleman, they tried the doctors couldn't do anything, right? They've tried so many things, so many different doctors, so many different people. They tried to find a way for his daughter to be better. Nothing was working. She was sick, and there was no recovery. It wasn't getting better, it was getting worse. And so Jairus knew that his daughter could die at any moment, but then he hears that Jesus is nearby in town. And so he's like, maybe, just maybe, I could go to him, and maybe he'll help my daughter out. He was desperate. His daughter was only 12. That's young, y'all. That's really young, right? To be that sick and almost about to die. Her life barely began. And so, Jairus, he really wanted Jesus to come and help him. And so the doctors couldn't help him. And so he's like, this is the only thing I have. This is all I can do. And so he hears Jesus is in Capernaum, and he's excited, because he's like, man, if he's nearby, I hear how he can do all kinds of miracles, and he can heal. He's done so many things. He's like, maybe, just maybe, I could go meet him and he'll heal my daughter. So he's like, okay, let me hurry and go. So he goes, and of course, when he gets there, there's a crowd of people there around Jesus, right? Like I told you, all the time, the people would come to hear Jesus preach, to get a miracle, just for him to touch them, something. So when Jairus sees all the crowd of people, he's like, okay, I got to get through these people. I need to see Jesus so that he can heal my daughter. So he goes, he sees all the crowd of people, he sees everyone, and he's like, okay, maybe, just maybe. So he's pressing through the crowd. He's like, please, excuse me, please, can I pass, please? He's like, I really need to get to Jesus. And I'm sure everybody's looking at him like, Jairus, we trying to do the same thing. We're trying to get to Jesus too. It's not just you. But Jairus is like, I really need him right now. So he's pushing through, and because he's like, my daughter could die any second. She could be dead now. I don't know. He's like, okay, let me hurry. Let me push through the crowd. And so he's like, let me get there. He's like, excuse me. And so finally he gets to Jesus, who's in the middle of all of the people. And so he's like, he falls before Jesus, and he's like, Jesus, he's like, please, I need you to really heal my daughter. She's sick. She needs to be healed. Someone needs to help her. He's like, please, could you please do something to help my daughter? Please. He's begging on his knees. He's begging Jesus to help him some way, somehow. He's like, do something. There's nothing nobody can do. The doctors have tried. We have tried. Nothing's happening. He's like, please, I really need you to hurry and please come and heal my daughter. And so Jesus, he sees, Jairus, and he says, okay, I'll come. Now this is different, right? Because with the nobleman's son, did Jesus go with the nobleman? No, he just simply told him, your son is healed, right? But with Jairus, Jesus hears Jairus's plea, which is pretty much similar to the nobleman, right? It's like the same thing. But instead, Jesus tells Jairus, I'll come with you. So why would Jesus do the miracle different? Now, it's the same thing, right? They both need their children to be healed. But when it comes to Jairus, Jesus is like, I'm going to come with you, Jairus.
Maybe he believed in him or not.
I don't know, but we'll talk about why. Jesus had a reason. Of course, always he has a reason. But yes, so he decides he's going to go with Jairus. So yeah, the nobleman, he simply said his son was healed. But with Jairus, the Lord decides, I'm going to go with you. So as they're trying to push their way through the crowd, because there was just a bunch of people surrounding them. And so Jesus is like, okay, Jairus, show me where you live. So they start to press through, going through the crowd. They have Jesus, Jairus, they have the disciples with Jesus as well. Then suddenly Jesus just stops. He stops all of a sudden. And he looks around and he says, who touched me? Now Peter's like, Lord, there's a whole crowd of people right here. What do you mean who touched you? We're like all crowded together. Like, what are you talking about? Who touched you? Right? Which is true, right? They're in a crowd of people. Everybody's touching everybody. And so Peter's like, Lord, there's a whole crowd of people around. What do you mean who touched you? But, you know, Peter didn't realize what Jesus was talking about when he said who touched him. But not just that. Peter, and we'll see this a lot as we get into more of our lessons. Peter speaks up a lot, but that's why he was chosen to be the one to start the church. But Peter, you know, he always has something to say. And so he's like, Lord, what you mean who touched you? Everybody's touching. But Jesus said, no. He says, no, Peter. He says, someone touched me wanting help. And when they touched me, I felt healing power leave me. Like they were healed because they touched me. And so Jesus knew what he was talking about. He didn't literally mean, oh, somebody touched me on my shoulder. No. What he meant was someone that needed something from him touched him, because when that person touched him, he felt the power of healing leave him and touch that person. That's just how powerful our God is. He holds the power of healing in anything we need, but it's in him. He has it. Like, that's why he can touch things, he can say things, and it'll be done. So when that person touched him, he felt the power of healing leave him, and he didn't even see who it was. Now, we know he really does know who it is, right? Because God knows everything. But you know, he didn't see who it was in that moment. Let's say that. Okay. And so he knew who touched him, but he just wanted to see if they would speak up. So he's like, someone touched me. And then all of a sudden, this woman, she speaks up and she's like, it was me, Lord. I touched you. She was like, I didn't want to, trouble you. And, you're dealing with all of the people. I didn't want to stop you from dealing with everyone. She was like, but I just needed to touch you. Right. So this woman, she had been sick and she knew that she needed Jesus. Right. But in her mind, she said to herself, I don't need him to see me. I don't need him to stop preaching to the crowd, to do anything. She says, what I need is I just need to touch him. She says, I just want to be able to touch him. That's it. She says, if I could touch him, then I'll be fine. She was like, I'll be healed. I'll be better. I don't even need him to see me or to even notice me at all. I just want to make sure I get close enough to where I could touch him. She had been sick for 12 years. That's a long time, right? 12 years dealing with the sickness. And she knew nothing she could do. She spent all her money paying the doctors to heal her. Nobody could heal her. And her only hope was left in Jesus. And so that's why she said, if I could just touch him, then I'll be healed. I'll be better. And so she's telling Jesus this, and she says, all my money is gone. I have nothing. She says, but my only chance of being healed was just to touch you. If I could just put my hand on you some way, somehow, I would be healed. And the crazy thing is, she didn't even touch him, like his skin, any of that. She touched the hem of his garment, which is like the bottom of his clothing. You know how, like, if you have on pants or something, like you touch the bottom of it, like, you know what I'm talking about? That's what she touched. She didn't even touch him, like his skin, him. She touched his clothing, but that's because everything that was on him was anointed like him. And so she didn't even touch him. She touched the hem of his garment, the bottom of his clothing. So that means she was probably like on her knees, and she probably like reached through the crowd on her knees, and just that was all she could get of him, was just the hem of his garment. But that was enough. She had enough faith to believe that if she could just touch any part of him, that she would be healed. And guess what happened? She was healed in this moment. And so Jesus looks at her and he says, daughter, your faith has healed you. He says, don't worry, you are now in good health. And instantly the woman was healed. From the moment she touched him, she was healed. Now, this is great, right? But where is Jesus supposed to be going? To Jairus' house. So Jairus is standing there and he's like, okay, my daughter, she needs to be healed, right? Remember? Okay. So yeah, so the woman was healed, she touched Jesus. All of this is happening in the same moment, but still at the same time, Jesus is going to Jairus' home to heal his daughter. So, and so Jesus is like, please, Lord. He's like, okay, can we go? My daughter needs to be healed. So just then though, at the same moment, so the woman is healed. Jairus is like, we need to go. One of Jairus' servants come and says, Jairus, master, don't bother the teacher anymore. Your daughter has died. It's too late. There's nothing we can do now. She's gone. She has died. It's no point in bothering him to come anymore because she's gone. And so the thing that Jairus feared, his daughter dying, happened, right? That's why he was rushing to hurry and get Jesus to come to his home, because he knew his daughter would die at any moment. And it ends up happening. His daughter is gone. His young daughter, who he really was hoping would make it, she ends up dying. And so Jairus is just like, he weeps because he's like, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? And so he's like, Lord, what I didn't want to happen, happened. And this is a word, because sometimes the things that we don't want to happen, it happens. Things that we fear sometimes, we're like, no, God, please. It might happen, but does it mean that it's the end of it? Because it happens, like, it's like, oh, well, that's over. Oh, well. And like, God can't do anything, right? Like, God can't turn a situation around. Like, he can't take that moment and make it into something better, something good, something different. A lot of times, people fear things happening. And a lot of times our fears that we fear don't even happen, first of all. But sometimes, yes, the things that we might fear may happen, but that doesn't mean that God is done, that it's like, oh, well, that's over. No. And so Jairus, he's feeling like this. He's like, my daughter's gone. He's like, man, what now? But Jesus tells Jairus, he says, Jairus, don't be afraid. He said, just trust me and believe. Your daughter's going to be okay. And so Jairus is like, what? My daughter's going to be okay. She's dead. That everybody know the end of life is what? Death. That's it. When you die, that's the end of life. And so Jairus is like, but something on the inside of him was like, believe. Something can happen, Jairus. Just believe. And so he says, come on, we're going to your home, Jairus. And so Jesus is still determined to go to Jairus' home. Even though the daughter is dead, she's gone. It's no like, oh, let's pray for her to be healed. No, she's dead. And so, but he tells Jairus, don't be worried. Don't be afraid at all. It's okay. Let's go to your home. So Jairus, he still has like a small ounce of belief. He's like, well, maybe he's going to do something. I don't know. So they arrive, and when they arrived to Jairus' home, they had all kind of people outside crying because, the girl had died. People were filled with grief. People were crying. They were like, oh, she's gone. She's crying. And one funny thing in the Bible days, and they kind of still do today, but anyway, back in Bible days, they had people that they hired as mourners, meaning they were people that would go and cry at a funeral. Like, that was their job. They would get paid to, I'm serious, they would get paid to cry at a funeral. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they would pay them. So yeah. So, yes. I'm serious. I'm really serious, guys. I'm not joking. So yeah, they were called hired mourners. And so they were hired. Now, they didn't even know the person who died, but their job was to go and cry at a funeral, to make it more dramatic, to make it, like, oh, this person died. We're so sad. Oh my gosh. And so they would come, they were paid to come and cry when someone died. And they didn't even know who the person was. They would just, I'm serious. I'm really serious. Like they would just go and cry. And so you had all of them, and they would make a show. Like they would cry like really loud. They would be so dramatic, right? They were just like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And so all of them are there crying, making all that noise outside. You have the family there crying. And so it was just a lot of confusion going on. And so Jesus and Jairus pass by, and Jesus sees all of this going on, and he's like, why are y'all making all this noise and crying? He says, the child is not dead. She's only sleeping. So Jesus is telling them she's not dead. Now they know she's dead because she's not breathing. Her heart is not beating. She's gone. But Jesus says she's just sleeping. She's not dead. And all the people, when they hear this, they start to laugh. They're like, okay, who is this man? Why is he saying this? They're like, he's crazy. He's saying, this girl is only sleeping. And they're like, what is he talking about? But so then Jesus says, he tells everyone to leave because they were all there making all this drama and all this, chaos and confusion. He says, leave. He says, only the people in the house is her mother, her father, and Peter, James, and John. Now, Jesus does have his 12 disciples, but he had what's called the big three, which they were the three closest disciples to Jesus. It was Peter, James, and John. We know Peter, the one who started the church. And then we know, and Peter also has his book, First Peter. And then we have John, who wrote the Gospel of John, and then we have James as well. And we'll talk about them again because they'll also witness other things that Jesus will do that none of the other disciples seen. Like whenever the transfiguration happens, they were the only three to go with Jesus in the mountain to see this. And so just what Jesus is about to do, they were the only three disciples. So he says her mother, her father, and Peter, James, and John were only allowed to go in the room. And so Jesus says, take me to the girl. Where is she? So Jairus and his wife go in the house and they lead Jesus to where she is. And now when you see the girl, you could clearly see she was dead, right? Well, according to Jesus, she is sleeping, but she wasn't breathing, heart not beating, nothing. She was dead. It was clear that she was gone. And so Jesus, though, he goes up to the little girl, he takes her hand, and he just says, all he says is, little girl, I say unto you, arise. And guess what happens? She comes back to life. Her heart starts beating again. She starts breathing again. She even opens her eyes. Her color in her skin comes back. She's back alive. Her blood is flowing again. She's alive instantly in this moment. So guess what he just did? He raised somebody from the dead. She was dead, right? He said sleeping, but she was, she was gone. Her soul, she was asleep, and he brought her back to life in this moment. Now, this is the first person he has done this to, bringing somebody back to life, and it's not the last, right? And we'll get to Lazarus. He did it to Lazarus, and then guess what? He did it to himself, right? After 3 days, what did he do? Rose from the dead. He brought himself back to life. So we see, this is a foreshadow of what he was going to do in the future. And so he brings this little girl back to life. She was gone. And instantly, all he says is arise, and everything in her awakens. And that's because the Lord has the power to bring dead things to life. That's what he does. When something seems done and over with and dead, he can revive it and bring it back to life. And that's exactly what he did with Jairus' daughter. He brought her back to life. And so that's why I said Jairus feared this happening, and it did happen. But was that the end of it? No. The Lord changed that, and he brought this girl back to life. Now, he doesn't do this all the time, right? Because sometimes people do die and they don't come back to life. Well, they live eternally in heaven or, hell, whatever. But, it just depends. If hopefully their soul is anchored in the Lord, then they'll go to heaven where they live eternally. But we do know that if your soul is not, anchored and saved, and you have not believed in Jesus, then, hell is where you will live eternally. And so, but sometimes some people have died, and they have been brought back to life. That's by the power of the Lord. Doctors will say they've done it, but it's the Lord who did it. But some people, sometimes their time has come for them to die, right, on earth, and they do die. But in some cases, the Lord, if he's not ready for someone just yet, he'll bring them back to life. That's what he does. And he does this with Jairus' daughter. He brings her back to life. He said she was sleeping, and guess what? She must have been, because he woke her up. He simply just said, little girl, arise. And so everybody in the room, Jairus, his wife, and the 3 disciples that were there, Peter, James, and John, they were speechless because they never saw anything like that happen before. They were like, oh my gosh, she just brought this girl back to life. Because it was clear to them that she wasn't alive. It was clear. But Jesus brought her back to life. And so they were like, oh my gosh. And not only was she brought back to life, but she was brought back to life completely healed. She sits up and she says, I'm hungry. That's the first thing she said, right? Because honestly, when you're sick, you really don't want to eat. I'm not sure if you had a cold before or the flu or something. You usually don't want to eat when you're sick, right? You're usually like, I just want to lay here. But that was a sign that she was healed, because the first thing she says is, I'm hungry. She says, I'm hungry. I want to eat. And so Jesus says, get the girl something to eat. And so the little girl, not only does she get up and eat, but then she walks outside, and everybody, especially the people who was out there making all that noise crying, they look and they're like, what? They were like, oh my gosh, it's like this is a miracle. We have never seen anything like this happen before. This girl was gone. We were all out here crying because she was gone. And now she's alive, walking, healthy, healed. They were like, whoa. And everybody who saw this said, truly, Jesus is the Son of God, because only God can do this. Nobody, no priests, even though they pray, they can't do this. This was only done by the power of God. And so she is instantly healed in this moment, completely and totally 100% healed, brought back to life and healed. So Jairus thought that it was over, but little did he know it was just the beginning of what Jesus would do by bringing his daughter back to life. So this was a miracle in itself. Jairus was amazed. He was speechless. He didn't know what to say, what to do, because he's like, wow. Everybody's like, wow. And so Jesus knew what he had planned. That's why he wanted to go to Jairus' home. He knew she was going to die. He knew, but he also knew that he was going to bring her back to life. So that's why he decided, I'm going to go to his home, because he knew exactly what he was going to do in this moment. He already knew the miracle. He already knew Jairus was going to come. He already knew she was going to die. He already knew all of this. And that's because the Lord knows everything, right? It's all predestined. Everything is written down already, right? He knew it was going to happen. So that's the healing of Jairus' daughter and the woman, right? Not just Jairus, but the woman who touched Jesus in the crowd as well. She was healed as well. 12 years she was sick. And instantly when she touched the hem of his garment, she was healed. So we see the power of God continuing to be at work always. And it's still at work today. It never stops. Amen?
Amen.
All right, so that's our lesson today on Jairus and the Lord healing Jairus' daughter, and also the woman who had an issue, and she 12 years she was sick, and the Lord healed her as well. So tomorrow we'll continue to talk about some miracles. Now tomorrow's miracle will be a little different than what they normally, tomorrow and Wednesday, the miracles will be a little different than what they're used to. It won't be a healing type of miracle, but it's going to be a provision type of miracle tomorrow. Okay, so that's what we'll talk about. Okay, amen. Amen. Awesome. All right, guys. So that is it for Bible on today.